Just got a new camera. How do I look? Okay, so in 2023, I started what was supposed to be a 5-part series called Where to Live in Minnesota, where I actually break down the 5 different sections of Hennepin County, which is the largest county in Minnesota and also home to Minneapolis. And it has come to my attention that as of today, almost 2 years later, that I've yet to post parts 4 and 5. So without further ado, in this video, we're going to be talking about the western suburbs of the Twin Cities, aka the most expensive area in all of Minnesota. This is Where to Live in Minnesota, Part 4. Stay tuned. What's going on, guys? Brandon Archie here, aka your favorite Minnesota realtor. And after almost 2 years, I'm finally getting back to my 5-part series of Where to Live in Minnesota, which if you haven't started watching those yet, you can watch 1 through 3 here. Now, with the most expensive section being Hennepin County, and that is the western suburbs. But as always, before we get started, if you are thinking about moving to Minnesota, whether it be now or next year, then shoot me an email at brandon@archiehomesgroup.com so that we can schedule a meeting to talk about what it is you're looking for and put together a plan to make your move as smooth as possible. And if you find this series helpful, then please make sure to hit that like button for me, and also please consider subscribing. Now, let's get started. Okay, so there are a lot of smaller cities in the western suburbs, especially around Lake Minnetonka area. So in this video, for the sake of simplicity, we're just gonna only talk about the main ones, which are Plymouth, Wayzata, Orono, Minnetonka, and Hopkins. So if you've been following me for a while, then you may have already seen my video on Plymouth already. But if you haven't watched that, then you can watch that right here. Now, Plymouth is the 8th largest city in Minnesota with a population of about 77,000 people. Now, Plymouth is about 15 minutes from downtown Minneapolis and also about 30 minutes to the airport. Now, if you're raising a family or looking to start one, then Plymouth is going to be one of the best cities in Minnesota that you can choose because of the #1 school district, Wayzata, is located here. Now, not to be confused with the actual city of Wayzata. Now, Plymouth is one of my favorite suburbs in the Twin Cities, partly because of location. Now, Plymouth is centrally located and sits right on 494, which is a highway that pretty much loops around the entire Twin Cities, making it super convenient to get anywhere in the Twin Cities in 30 minutes or less. Now, Plymouth also has plenty of trails that can be taken all over the Twin Cities, and there are plenty of parks and green space as well. Now, one of the most popular parks in Plymouth is French Park, which is one of the regional parks in the Three Rivers Park District. That was a tongue twister. Now, French Park has a huge playground, picnic areas, trails, and even a beach that sits on Medicine Lake. They also have a pavilion that you can rent out for events like birthday parties or even weddings. And fun fact, my mom actually got married here. And although there are quite a few apartments available in Plymouth, only 1 or 2 of them are going to be located in Wayzata School District. And yes, even though the vast majority of school districts in Minnesota are now open enrollment, in order to get into Wayzata School District, you actually have to live there. So as you can imagine, because it's such a highly sought after location to be in, most of the homes sell for a premium and they sell fast. Don't worry though, because only about half of Plymouth is in Wayzata School District, so if you want the location, but you don't really care about the schools, then you should be able to find some options here that are a little bit less expensive. So now, since we're talking about Wayzata School District, let's now move on over to the next city on our list, which is Wayzata. Not the school district, the actual city. Although all of the homes in Wayzata are also in Wayzata School District. I'm confusing you, aren't I? Now, Wayzata is a much smaller city than Plymouth with a population of only just over 4,200 people. Now, while Wayzata may be a small city already, one of the other reasons why there aren't that many people that live there is because, well, it's expensive. AF. The median sales price in Wayzata for 2024 was just over $1 million, and that's actually down 7% compared to 2023. And yes, Wayzata is synonymous with luxury. And when you're driving around the city, it's not uncommon to see all kinds of luxury vehicles driving around. In fact, I have a game that me and my mom play whenever we're in Wayzata called Count the G-Wagons, where we count every time we see one and we try to see how many we can find by the time we leave Wayzata. So far, our record is 4. Okay, so aside from that, Wayzata is a beautiful city that has sweeping views of Wayzata Bay. There are so many boutique stores and nice restaurants in Wayzata that it makes for a very nice day trip or a nice night out. And one of my favorite restaurants in Wayzata is Cove, which sits right on the bay. Now, during the summer, you can sit on the patio, stare at the water, and have one of the best lobster rolls in the city. Now, with Wayzata being so small, you also get that small town feel that comes with it, and in most cases, you would often forget that you are only 15 to 20 minutes away from downtown Minneapolis. Now, to put it in context, the median sales price for Wayzata for 2024 was just over $1 million, while Plymouth was only $500,000. Now, I know $500,000 may still sound like a lot to a lot of people, but when you consider being in the best school district in Minnesota, it may actually be worth it. Okay, now the next city is a little more west of Wayzata, and that's Orono. Now, if you thought Wayzata was expensive, it's not. But before we go into that, if you are finding this video helpful so far, then please make sure to hit that like button for me. And also, if you want... And if you're looking for more content like this and you haven't already done so, please also consider subscribing. Now, Orono is one of those cities that you probably have never been to or really have no reason to go to unless you live there or know someone that does live there. Now, during the Parade of Homes, which if you don't know what it is, it's basically like one giant open house that happens each year here in Minnesota, where home builders all over the Twin Cities let you tour some of the best and most expensive homes. Now, Parade of Homes happens twice a year, with the next one coming up here in March, and the next one after that being the end of September. They also have one in June, which is called their Artisan Homes, and these ones are the super expensive homes. Now, it's very rare that people get to tour homes like these, so if you're in the area during these times, then I would highly consider checking it out. Anyways, the reason why I went on that tangent just now is because a good majority of these super expensive homes that I'm talking about are in Orono. Now, you may have thought that Wayzata was the most expensive city with a median sales price of just over $1 million, but Orono actually has Wayzata beat with a median sales price of just over $1.1 million. Now, the population of Orono is about double the size of Wayzata as well. Now, I mentioned that there is no real reason to go to Orono, and that's mostly because it's very residential for the most part. There aren't really any notable stores or restaurants that would require anybody to go check it out. Now, the great thing about Orono, if you can afford to live there, however, is that it's a very quiet city and large wooded lots and big houses. There are parks just like all the rest of the Twin Cities, and there's also the Loose Line bike trail that goes all the way down to Hutchinson, Minnesota, which is about an hour away from Orono, or you could ride it the opposite way all the way to Minneapolis. So although Orono is a quiet and almost exclusive city, you're still connected to the rest of the Twin Cities. Okay, so now that we've looked at some of the most expensive cities in the Twin Cities, let's bring it back down to earth to a much more affordable city that also happens to have the #2 school district in all of Minnesota, and that is Minnetonka. Now, the name Minnetonka may sound familiar to you if you're a Prince fan, but interestingly enough, I can't say that word, interestingly enough, Lake Minnetonka actually isn't even technically in Minnetonka. Cece! Get out! Jesus Christ, dude. It is, however, just a stone's throw away from all of the major lakes in the area, which is where Minnetonka gets its name, which means great water. Now, Minnetonka has a population of about 55,000, making it a much bigger city than Wayzata and Orono, but about 20,000 people smaller than Plymouth. But as far as location goes, Minnetonka is situated along the highway just like Plymouth is, so it will be about the same distance to get to places. It is slightly cheaper than Plymouth as well, with a median sales price of $492,000 versus Plymouth's $500,000. Now, further comparing Minnetonka to Plymouth is where Wayzata School District is not open enrollment, Minnetonka School District is. So again, if schools are important to you, but Plymouth is on the higher side of your budget, then I would also check out Minnetonka as a very good second option. Now, Ridgedale Mall, which is another major indoor shopping mall here in the Twin Cities with about 140 stores, as well as a few different restaurant options. Ridgedale is located in the northwest corner of Minnetonka and is only 10 minutes away from downtown Minneapolis. So whether you go there frequently or not depends on what part of Minnetonka you live in. Now, Minnetonka is a very convenient city to live in because of all the highways that run through it, like Highway 7, 494, 394, and 169. And you also have major streets like Excelsior Boulevard and Minnetonka Boulevard. Now, Minnetonka has over 50 parks and green spaces, as well as over 100 miles of bike trails. Now, this is also a theme with most of the cities in the Twin Cities, but since Minnetonka is an older city than others like Plymouth or Maple Grove, then you get much more of a mature city with tons of fully grown trees. The homes in Minnetonka Minnetonka are going to range from being built in the early 1900s all the way up to brand new construction homes. But most of those new construction homes are going to be in the millions of dollars. So if you are considering buying a home in Minnetonka, you can almost expect to buy a home that's going to be somewhere in the 50s to the late 90s. So easy access to highways and major roads, older neighborhood with mature trees and green space, and highly ranked schools. If these things appeal to you, then Minnetonka may be your best bet. And last but not least for the western cities is little old Hopkins. Now, Hopkins is a very unique city in the sense that you get a mixture of city, suburbs, and small town all at the same time. And if you want the benefit of location like you do in Minnetonka, but without the price tag, then Hopkins may be the city for you. Now, the median sales price in Hopkins was only $371,000, which is more than $100,000 lower than Minnetonka or Plymouth, and is even $10,000 lower than the Twin Cities as a whole. Now, Hopkins is also a much smaller city than the two of them with a population of only 19,000. Hopkins is situated right between Minnetonka, Edina, and St. Louis Park, all of which are more expensive than Hopkins. Now, downtown Hopkins is where you're going to find mostly everything on Main Street. You have your cool antique shops and local markets, as well as some of the local shops and restaurants. You wouldn't really think you were only 15 minutes away from Minneapolis. Now, if you are looking for a larger big box store though, then you won't find those in Hopkins, but if you head north, you're only about 5 minutes away from Knollwold Mall in St. Louis Park, which has everything you could ever need there, or you could head 10 minutes east and get to Southdale Mall in Edina to do the same exact thing, all without the price tag of living in those cities. Now, if I had to rank my favorite city in the western suburbs though, it would most definitely have to be Plymouth. So, with that being said, you should watch this video next.